And of course, if you have any questions, once I hit to share the screen, I can't see you again. So just make sure you put your questions in the chat if you want to type them right away, or just hold them when I stop sharing the screen. I'll come back and ask you if you have any questions about it. But this one is coming from the intro. If you had a chance to watch Khan Academy yesterday or this morning, or if you had a chance to do Aztec, the square and the rectangle are the basic ones that were in the introduction. So that's the one that we're going to do right now. So we're going to start with the rectangle. Okay, so just in case, I'm going to click back to the geometry index, just in case you want to see where this is. So we're working from the geometry index, and we are still in plane geometry, like we said yesterday for the introduction. So that is this section right here, talking about a flat surface, like this pentagram, or what we're going to do. So we're skipping over triangles for right now, and we're going to the rectangle and the square. So these are some of the basic shapes. Like we saw, Gladys was on trapezoid already. We'll be getting to that maybe by the end of the week, because we're going to stick with these quadrilaterals. But first, we're going to click on the rectangle. So these are the things that I'm recommending that you draw out on a piece of paper, saying that you understand what a rectangle actually means from this perspective. So here, it's got the definition. A rectangle is a four-sided flat shape where every angle is a right angle. So we already talked about angles a little bit, but you can see in the picture, and this is what I would recommend drawing, that this is the rectangle. There's the right angle box in every corner. They also have this line on the side that's showing that that's equal. So I think this is important to draw just to refresh your memory, or if you want to take a picture, if you're doing, digital notes. But what you want to say is that these two, the lines with two dashes on top of them are equal. And then the line with one dash is equal. So this is just showing how the lines of this shape go together and make up the rectangle. So you can see right here, you can jump to area of a rectangle or perimeter of a rectangle. Yesterday, we kind of just did an introduction to both of those things, where perimeter is the outside line of the shape and area is how much space the shape takes up. Like if this were a carpet, it'd be area. If it was a picture frame, it'd be perimeter. So this is the definition again. It's saying that each internal angle is 90 degrees. So it just has the box there. There's a space for you to adjust the rectangle just to see how it's going to stay parallel as you make it smaller or bigger. And now we're coming down to the two formulas. So these are, again, just the flat, plain shape formula, but what I'm suggesting is you save a little bit of space at the bottom of your page for rectangle, or you hold out two note cards, two index cards, or you just know that you're going to have space in your digital notes for when we get to a prism, which is going to be the flat rectangle with a little bit of height. So right now we've got area of a rectangle, perimeter of a rectangle, but we will have volume of a rectangle, which is essentially a box or a prism, once we get to the 3D shapes. So here we talked about this a little bit because there were some formulas on the introduction yesterday, but area of the rectangle is width times the height or length times the height, you might see. So this one says a rectangle is 6 meters wide and 3 meters high. What is its area? All you're going to do is apply this formula that says width times the height. So 6 times 3 is 18. So this goes back to when we were doing algebra. This is essentially the substitution or evaluating when you know what the width and the height is. There are some times though, like when we were doing algebra, that you might know the area overall. So you're going to know the area, and then you might only know the width and not the height. And then that's when we're using the principles of algebra, and that you're just going to divide then. So if you know the area is 18 and you know the width is 6, you're going to say 18 divided by 6 must be the height. So the first thing to do is really just always start with the formula. Area equals width times height. In the word problem or in the labeling of the picture, you just want to replace. Do you know the area? Then you put that number there. Do you know the width or the height? Then you put that number there. In this case, we knew the width and the height, so what we had to actually come up with is the area. Coming down a little bit, here is the actual formula for perimeter. So now the reason why the formulas are important is because you don't know what kind of question you're going to get on your test. So sometimes, like we saw when we were doing the task exercise book, you just have to know the formula for something might be one of the questions. So you don't always have to solve. Sometimes you're just applying the definition, like we said, or applying a formula, or in those questions where you're checking, is this student correct? You have to say, oh, they found the area instead of the perimeter, right? So this is why it's important for us to know the formulas and the definitions of shapes, because we might say the person applied the definition of a square to the rectangle, and that's where they made their mistake. So you just want to make sure that you're doing the math literacy again, right? So the perimeter formula, perimeter equals 2 times the width plus the height. So what they're saying is if you know one width and one height, you have to double it for the other sides of the rectangle. So in this case, a rectangle has a width of 12 centimeters and a height of 5 centimeters. What is its perimeter? So again, you start with this formula and then you replace the information that you know. So you're still saying 2 times because 2 on the outside of the parentheses means multiplication, like we did with the order of operations and the distributive property. So you know the width is 12, so you replace the W with the 12 centimeters. You know the height is 5, so you replace the H with the 5 centimeters. And then here in this row, they're just adding up what's in the parentheses, like the order of operations. So 12 plus 5 is 17, and then last, you're doing the multiplication. So you have 2 times 17 is 34. So that is the perimeter. And like we saw on yesterday's quiz, there might be a time where you have to go back and forth between this is the perimeter, so what must the area be if it's labeled? So that means you have to understand the perimeter formula to maybe get the width and the height, and then apply that in multiplication for the area. So coming down a little bit more, this is the diagonal of the rectangle. So here it's saying a rectangle has 2 diagonals. They are equal in length and intersect in the middle. So this is the diagonal. And this could be like if you're measuring across your TV or across your laptop, it's going to be the diagonal from one corner on the left coming down to one corner on the right, or one corner on the left going up to one corner on the right. So that's the diagonal. In order to find out what the diagonal is, here is the formula. So in words, it says the diagonal is the square root of the width squared plus the height squared. So this is what it looks like in numbers and symbols. D is for the diagonal, equals, and this is the square root symbol, and then the parentheses, the width squared plus the height squared. So now that you have this as your formula, in this example, you can do the substitution. So here the width, it says, is 12 centimeters. So you're replacing the W with 12. The height is 5 centimeters, so you're replacing the H with 5. And then you're back to doing the order of operations again. So this is why that is one of those foundational skills that we practice, because it keeps coming back up, right? You have to do the what's in the parentheses, right? So we said, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally was one acronym for the order of operations. The please is the parentheses, but now inside of these parentheses are the exponents, which is the excuse. So you have to do the 5 times 5 is 25. 12 times 12 is 144 first. Now within the parentheses, you're still working to do addition. And you're saying 25 plus 144 is 169. Then you find out, let me take the square root of 169. So to review, the square root is what a number times itself, right? So the square root of 25 is 5. 5 squared is 25. So when we're saying 5 squared, that is 5 with the small 2 exponent. When we're saying the square root of 25, we're doing that in reverse. What times itself gives you the 25? And this is where we said it could be -5 times -5 for the rule of 2 negatives making a positive. Or in this case, it could be 5 times 5 for just 2 positive numbers multiplying and staying positive. So this is one, when you get to diagonal, this one is going to use the square root key, and you have to remember, do the squaring, do the addition, and then find the square root of that number. And it makes sense because the diagonal is not going to be 169. That's way too big for something that had a 12 width and a 5 height. So you do want to think, if you see 169 on your multiple choice, that's an example of somebody who didn't finish all of the way, right? So whether that is the person is incorrect in their word problem, like when we were doing the task exercise book, or if you just see 169 as one of the answers here on Math is Fun, you're just not finished with the whole problem. So you have to still do the square root key, which is finding the square root of 169. Now, I will say sometimes on a test, the square root key or the square root symbol is left in the answers. In that case, the answer would be the square root is 169, and it would not be 13. So this is where the reading comes into play too. You don't want to do the square root of 13. So if you look at your answers and the square root symbol is still in the answers, that means that you do want to pick this one out. So it all depends on how your answers look. Let's look at number 1. It's just saying how many right angles does a rectangle have? So this is again back to a definition. As you move through, that's definition, definition. Now you're going to get to doing some of the formulas where it's asking for you to calculate the perimeter and perimeter, but now here it's asking you to calculate the area. So you do have to just make sure you're paying attention because it's the same numbers. You have to pay attention to what is the actual question. Here, calculate the length of the diagonal. So it's asking you for the exact diagonal, doesn't have the square root in the answers. Here's diagonal, and then you're back to the beginning. So this is the first one, is rectangle. And the other one that we're going to look at is square. So this is the same kind of page introduction where it's giving you the definition. A square is a flat shape with 4 equal sides, and every angle is a right angle, which is 90 degrees. So the only thing that's different in this shape is that there's 1 dash because all 4 of the sides are equal on a square. So that is something that you have to know the difference between a square and a rectangle. But otherwise, the opposite sides are parallel. 90 degrees are the internal angles. So it's similar to a rectangle. So now when you come down to look at the 2 formulas, the area of a square is normally just, it's spoken about differently because every side is the same. But it's basically the same as the rectangle. The reason why the formula looks different is because the side is the same. So the area of a rectangle is the side squared, because instead of saying width times height, these numbers are exactly the same. So if this was a 5 for the length of this side, you would just be saying 5 times 5 if you did length times width. You're still going to come out to the right answer. But when you see a formula on a formula sheet, or if you read a formula in a word problem, it looks different because it's just 5 squared. That is the formula for area of a square. But it comes out to be length times the width, or A times A. So this one says a square has a side length of 6. What is the area? Instead of thinking that you need a width and a height, you only need to know one side because it's a square. So you're just going to say 6 times 6 is 36. Here also they're talking about the diagonal. Half, the area is also half of the diagonal squared. So now this is half of the diagonal squared in symbols. The diagonal with the little 2 is squared, and then half of that is the fraction bar for division, so divided by 2. So if you see this formula, that is the formula for the diagonal. Now, perimeter is just the distance around the square. So if you know one side, it's 4 times that side. In this example, a square has a side of 12. What is the perimeter? You'd be saying 12 plus 12 plus 12 plus 12, or a shortcut for the formula is just to say 4 times 12 is 48. So now here again, they're talking about the diagonal. The diagonal is the side length times the square root of 2. So here's another formula. The diagonals of the rectangle and the square are the questions that are a little bit more advanced. But you're going to stick with the formula and do the replacing of whatever you know. So just like in algebra, this is the formula. You're trying to find the diagonal. If the side length is 5, you replace the 5, and then you take the square root of 2. So make sure you can Google a scientific calculator if you want to. We were using this one, the Web 2.0 one, but if you just say scientific calculator, one comes up on Google that has the square root key right here. And then this is the one that we were pulling up a lot in class, was the Web 2.0. And here you can see that there's a square root, cubed root key. So there's a couple more keys here. And I know some people already have a scientific calculator, or you might be using a scientific calculator app.
What, Mariah?
So you just want to know wherever your...
Oh, I got to do something first, right?
Did I not mute? What happened to James?
Huh?
I said, did I not mute you, James?
I was just going out with my daughter anyway, so I didn't hear.
It's okay, it's okay. So just whatever calculator you're using, look for that key, because you're gonna need it for a couple of the questions that are doing the diagonal. So you can use the Web 2.0, you can use Google, you can use your cell phone, whatever you need to use. So coming down a little bit more, here you're gonna see the quiz. So these quizzes are similar because the rectangle and the square are similar. So as you go through, you're gonna see some of them are definitions again. Perimeter, then area, an area. So you just have to make sure that you are reading the directions so that you use the right formula. So let me stop sharing and then we'll open up for some questions. Okay, so does anybody have a question from the introduction yesterday or from what we just showed today? No?
No.
Okay. I saw some people started answering what their morning routine was in text message. So feel free to answer that question too. Maybe we can compile a little list of everybody's best thing about their morning routine, and then we'll be superstars by the end of the week. So I know one thing about a morning routine is that you definitely need to get sleep the night before, right? So my sleep schedule is completely off because I'm staying up later than normal, trying to catch up with things from the day that I haven't done. So that's definitely important if you want to get up, which is why hopefully everybody is getting rest enough to get up and kind of review before we come together. If you haven't had a chance to do the introduction from yesterday or to do Aztec, you want to still stick with those two. I'm going to text you these two quizzes for rectangle and for square, but make sure you're still working through the introduction so that you can get the audio lesson. Because I do think it's good to listen on Aztec. It's a good way to learn. And also Khan Academy, someone is talking it out and drawing and showing pictures. So I think that those things are good too. So if you have any questions later, feel free to text me. I'm gonna send you the 2 links, but those are the 2 assignments that go along with this little 30-minute class. Is that a question, Esperanza?
No.
Vuela? Or I just see your hand at the bottom of the screen.
With this.
Oh, okay. See, virtual learning. I'm like, is that a hand raise?
I forgot that I'm in class.
So these are the first ones. You today and then tomorrow morning, you want to know these 2 formulas, because I don't think that they really give you area of a square and a rectangle on your formula sheet. Sometimes the very easy formulas that they expect that you learn, sometimes you learn them actually in elementary school or in junior high school. Maybe by the time you're getting to the kite and the trapezoid, your sheet or your directions might share the formula with you, and then you just have to replace. But some of the easier formulas, they expect you to memorize and have them down from before high school even. So what you want to do today is, if you're drawing out note cards, doing the online learning, or just taking notes in your notebook, is make sure you can memorize the flat square, rectangle, triangle, circle. So we're going to go over those basic things this week. And those are the ones that you want to spend the 5 minutes memorizing. So I'm going to stop recording.